She told me I couldn't afford anything in her store. She looked at me like I was dirt on her expensive floor. 10 years later, I walked into that same store as the owner. But not just that store. I own 12 luxury stores worth $4.7 million. And she lost everything. If you've ever been made to feel small, like you don't belong, like you'll never be enough, stay with me. Because this story, it's about what happens when you take that pain and turn it into power. And trust me, the moment I faced her again, you're going to want to see that. I need to take you back to where it all started. And I'm curious, where are you listening to this from right now? Are you at home, maybe doing chores or driving somewhere? I love knowing where my listeners are because it reminds me that we're all just trying to make it through our days, you know? Anyway, let me take you back. My name is Carmen Rodriguez, and 10 years ago I was 35 years old, living in a small 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs with my 2 daughters, Sophia, who was 8, and Isabella, who was 6. My husband, Miguel, he'd been gone for 2 years, killed in a construction accident. One day he was there, kissing me goodbye at 5:30 in the morning, and by noon, I got the call that changed everything. They said it was quick, that he didn't suffer, but I suffered. God, did I suffer. And so did my girls. After Miguel died, I took whatever work I could find. I'd been a teacher back in Mexico, but here, my credentials meant nothing. My English wasn't great. I had this thick accent that made people treat me different, and I needed money fast. So I started cleaning houses on my own, building up clients through word of mouth, rich people's homes. I made about $1,600 a month, which barely covered rent, food, and the girls' school supplies. I shopped at thrift stores, cut my own hair, and learned how to make one chicken last for 5 meals. At night, after the girls went to bed, I'd sit at our tiny kitchen table and cry. I felt like I was at the bottom of a well, looking up at a tiny circle of light that I'd never reach. Rock bottom, they call it. And honey, I was living there. But here's the thing about cleaning rich people's houses. You see things. You notice things. I'd walk into these massive homes with their perfect furniture, their expensive decorations, their fancy candles that cost more than I made in a week, and I'd think about how everything was arranged. Most of the time, it looked beautiful, but cold, like nobody actually lived there. Sometimes, after I finished cleaning, I'd move things around a little bit. I'd take a vase and put it where the light hit it better, or I'd arrange the coffee table books in a way that looked more inviting. Little things. And you know what? My clients started noticing. They'd say things like, "Carmen, did you move this? It looks so much better." Or, "Carmen, where did you find this candle holder? I didn't even remember I had it." One of my regular clients was this woman named Mrs. Patterson. She was in her 60s, a widow like me, and she was different from the others. She'd actually talk to me, ask about my girls, offer me lunch. She treated me like a person, not like the help. One day in March, I remember it was a Tuesday, she called me into her living room. She said, "Carmen, I need your help. My sister-in-law's birthday is coming up and I want to get her something special. She loves candles and home decor. Would you mind going to this store for me and picking something out? I trust your taste more than mine." She handed me her credit card and wrote down the name of the store on a piece of paper. Sterling and Company. I'd never heard of it, but she said it was in the fancy shopping district downtown, the one where all the stores had doormen and windows that looked like museum displays. I felt nervous just thinking about going there, but Mrs. Patterson looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "You have better taste than anyone I know, Carmen. Please, do this for me." So that Thursday, I got dressed in my best outfit, which was really just a plain black skirt and a white blouse I'd bought at Target 3 years ago. I put on the only pair of decent shoes I owned, these black flats that were starting to wear through at the bottom. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to feel confident, but all I saw was a cleaning lady playing dress-up. My daughters were at school, I had the afternoon off, and I drove my old beat-up van to the shopping district, feeling more and more anxious with every mile. When I got there, I had to park 6 blocks away because parking in that area cost $20 an hour. I walked those 6 blocks in my worn-out shoes, past stores with names I couldn't pronounce, and I felt smaller with every step. By the time I reached Sterling and Company, my heart was pounding. The store was beautiful with huge glass windows displaying candles and vases arranged like art. The door was heavy wood with brass handles, and when I pulled it open, a little bell chimed. The smell hit me first. It smelled expensive, like vanilla and something rich. The floors gleamed, and everything was displayed on white shelves and glass tables. There was only one other customer in there, a woman in a cream-colored pantsuit looking at picture frames. And behind the counter, there was her, Jacqueline Sterling. I didn't know her name yet, but I could tell she was the owner by the way she stood, by the way she looked at me the second I walked in. She was probably 38, tall, blonde, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my rent. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel like she was calculating your net worth in her head. I walked toward the candle section, trying to look like I belonged there, trying to remember what Mrs. Patterson had said about trusting my taste. There were candles everywhere, in all different sizes and colors, with prices that made my stomach drop. $60 for a candle, $85, $120. I picked up one that smelled like lavender and honey, and I was reading the label when I heard her voice. "Excuse me." Her voice was sharp, like a knife. I looked up and she was walking toward me, and honey, the look on her face. It was like I'd just tracked mud all over her perfect floor. "Are you lost?" I felt my face get hot. "No," I said. "I'm here to buy a gift." My voice sounded small, and I hated that. I hated how my accent got thicker when I was nervous. She stopped a few feet away from me, crossing her arms. "A gift," she repeated, and I could hear the doubt in her voice. She looked me up and down, taking in my Target outfit, my worn shoes, my handbag that had a small tear in the corner. "For whom?" "For my employer's sister-in-law," I said. She gave me her credit card and asked me to choose something nice. I held up the candle. "This one is beautiful." Jacqueline's eyes went cold. "Your employer," she said slowly. "So you're the help." I felt something twist in my chest. "I work for Mrs. Patterson, yes," I said. "She trusts my taste." And that's when she did it. She reached out and took the candle from my hands, not roughly, but firmly, like she was confiscating something from a child. "I'm sorry," she said, "but we don't serve people who are sent to shop. This is a boutique for our established clientele, not a place for errands." "But I have her credit card," I said, my voice getting smaller. "She asked me to come." Jacqueline set the candle back on the shelf and turned to face me fully. "Listen," she said, and her voice dropped lower, like she was sharing a secret. "I can tell by looking at someone whether they belong here or not. And you? You can't afford this. Even if you saved for a year, you couldn't afford a single item in this store." She gestured toward the door. "There's a Home Goods about 3 miles from here. I'm sure you'll find something more appropriate there." I stood there, frozen. The other customer was staring now, pretending to look at frames but obviously listening. My hands started to shake. I wanted to say something, to tell her that I had money, that I had Mrs. Patterson's credit card right there in my purse, but the words wouldn't come. All I could feel was this burning shame spreading through my whole body. "You need to leave," Jacqueline said, her voice getting louder. "Now. Before I call security." Security. Like I was a criminal. Like I was dangerous. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not there. Not in front of her. So I turned around and walked toward that heavy door, my worn-out shoes squeaking slightly on that perfect wooden floor. Behind me, I heard Jacqueline say to the other customer, "I apologize for that interruption. Some people just don't understand boundaries." I pushed through the door and the bell chimed again, this cheerful little sound that felt like it was mocking me. I walked those 6 blocks back to my van, and I didn't cry. I didn't let myself cry until I was inside, doors locked, sitting in the driver's seat with my forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Then I sobbed. I sobbed like something inside me had broken. Because it had. 10 years in this country, working my fingers to the bone, trying so hard to build something for my girls, and I was still just the help. Still someone who didn't belong. Still someone who couldn't afford this. I sat in that van for 20 minutes, crying until my eyes were swollen and my throat hurt. Then I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove to Home Goods like she'd suggested. I bought a nice candle set for $30. When I got back to Mrs. Patterson's house, I handed her the candle and her credit card. She looked at the Home Goods bag and frowned. Sterling and Company was closed? She asked. No, I said quietly. They didn't have what you wanted. I lied because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want her to know that I'd been thrown out like trash. But what happened when Mrs. Patterson found out the truth changed everything. The next day, she called me. Carmen, she said, her voice tight with anger. I just spoke to my friend Margaret, who saw what that woman did to you. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to bother you, I started, but she cut me off. Bother me? Carmen, that woman humiliated you. She had no right. I'm going down there right now. And she did. Mrs. Patterson confronted Jacqueline Sterling in front of her staff and customers. She told me later that she said, "How dare you treat someone like that? Carmen has more class in her little finger than you'll ever have. You just lost a customer." When Mrs. Patterson came back, she sat me down at her kitchen table. Carmen, she said, you have a gift. You don't just clean. You make spaces beautiful. You see things. You understand how to make a space feel like home. Why are you cleaning houses when you could be selling beauty? I didn't understand what she meant at first. Me? I said. Mrs. Patterson, I'm just a cleaning lady. I don't know anything about business. She reached across the table and took my hand. You know more than you think, she said. You have an eye for this. You have taste. You have heart. That woman at Sterling and Company, she has money and a fancy store, but she doesn't have what you have. She doesn't understand that luxury isn't just about expensive things. It's about making people feel special. You made my house feel like home, Carmen. You could do that for other people too. That conversation planted something in me. A tiny seed that I tried to ignore at first because it seemed impossible. But it stayed there, growing, whispering when I was cleaning someone's bathroom. What if I could do this? What if I could sell beautiful things and make people feel the way I wanted to feel? What if I could create something for people like me, people who deserved beauty? But starting a business? I didn't know the first thing about it. I barely had any money. Miguel's life insurance had given me $8,000, and I'd been saving it for emergencies. I had maybe $3,000 more in savings. That was it. $11,000. I spent weeks thinking about it, losing sleep. The girls would ask why I was so quiet. I didn't want to tell them because I was afraid of failing. But then one night, Sophia came into the kitchen. "Mama," she said, "are you okay?" I looked at her, this beautiful girl with Miguel's eyes. I was teaching her by example. If I stayed small, stayed scared, what was I teaching her? That people like us don't get to dream? So I made a decision. I took that $11,000 and decided to try. Just try. If it didn't work, at least I'd know I tried. I couldn't keep living at rock bottom. I had to start climbing, even if I fell. I started researching. I went to the library and checked out books about small business and home decor. I watched YouTube videos at night after the girls went to bed, learning about wholesalers, markup, profit margins. None of it was easy. I'd have to read things 3 or 4 times because of the language barrier. But I kept going. I found out about this upscale flea market that happened every weekend in the Arts District. Vendors could rent booth space for $200 a month. So I rented a booth, 10 feet by 10 feet, where I could display things. I bought my first inventory from a wholesaler I found online. Beautiful candles and small home decor items. I picked things I loved, things that felt warm and inviting. My first day at the flea market, I was so nervous I thought I might throw up. I'd arranged everything beautifully, the way I'd arrange things in the houses I cleaned. The girls came with me, helping me set up. And then we waited. The first few hours, people walked by without stopping. By noon, I'd made one sale. $22. By the end of the day, $83. I'd spent $200 on the booth, $3,000 on inventory. I was already in the hole. But I kept going. Every weekend, I was there. I started learning what sold, what didn't. I started talking to customers, really listening. Slowly, people started coming back. Word started spreading. But here's what nobody tells you about starting a business. It's lonely. It's exhausting. It's terrifying. I kept my cleaning job because I couldn't risk losing that steady income. So I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, get the girls ready for school, go clean houses until 4, pick them up, make dinner, help with homework, and then at night, I'd work on the business. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, running on coffee and fear and stubborn hope. The girls started asking questions. Mama, why are you always so tired? Mama, when are you going to have time to play with us? And God, that hurt. I was doing this for them, to build something better, but I was missing moments with them, and that's when everything started falling apart. 8 months in, I still wasn't making a profit. I was barely breaking even. My cleaning clients started complaining that I seemed distracted. 2 of them let me go. My income dropped. I had to choose between buying new inventory and paying the electric bill. I remember one night, it was November, cold and dark, and I was driving home from the flea market. I'd made $43 that day. $43 for 10 hours of work. I pulled over into a grocery store parking lot because I couldn't see the road anymore through my tears. I sat there in my van, the engine running to keep warm, and I thought about giving up. About how stupid I'd been to think I could do this. About how I should have just stayed a cleaning lady, stayed small, stayed safe. I looked at the photo I kept on my dashboard, a picture of Miguel and me on our wedding day. We were so young, so full of hope. We thought we'd have forever, and I thought about what he'd say if he could see me now. Would he be proud? Or would he think I was wasting the money he died for? I picked up my phone and I called my sister back in Mexico. It was late, but she answered. I told her everything, crying so hard I could barely speak. And you know what she said? She said, Carmen, you've been in the hole before. When Miguel died, you were in the deepest hole of your life. But you climbed out. You're still here. Your girls are fed, they're safe, they're loved. You're already winning. This business thing, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But you already know how to survive rock bottom. You've already done the hardest thing. Something shifted in me that night. I realized I was so focused on whether the business would succeed that I'd forgotten why I started. Not just for the money, though God knows we needed it, but because someone made me feel small and I wanted to prove that I wasn't. I wanted to prove that people like me, we belong. We deserve respect. The next day, I went back to the flea market with different energy. I stopped apologizing for my prices, stopped second-guessing my taste. When customers came, I talked to them with warmth and genuine interest. And people responded. They felt it. The authenticity. That's when things started to change. Little by little. A customer bought a candle and brought her friend the next week. Someone from a local blog saw my booth and wrote a feature about me. She called me a hidden gem, and suddenly I had people driving from an hour away. I'll never forget the day things started to shift. It was a Saturday morning in May, around 10 o'clock. The market was busy, people everywhere, but I'd only made 2 small sales. I was straightening a display when this woman walked up. Her name was Linda, I learned later. She was probably in her early 50s, wearing a charcoal business suit that looked expensive but not stuffy. She had this way of looking at things, really seeing them, you know. She picked up a candle, smelled it, set it down, picked up a ceramic bowl, turned it over to look at the bottom, set it down. She did this for maybe 20 minutes, not saying a word, just examining everything. Finally, she looked at me and said, "You have incredible taste. Everything here, it works together. It tells a story." I felt my face get hot because I wasn't used to compliments like that. "Thank you," I said. I try to choose things that make people feel something, not just look pretty. She nodded slowly. "Do you do custom orders? Larger projects?" My heart started racing. I'd never done anything like that, but I heard myself say, "Yes, of course. What did you have in mind?" She explained that she worked for Patterson and Mitchell, a law firm downtown, and they were renovating their offices. They wanted to move away from the cold, corporate look and create something warmer, more welcoming. They needed candles for the conference rooms, decorative pieces for the lobby, things that would make clients feel comfortable instead of intimidated. She said she'd been to a dozen stores and couldn't find anyone who understood what she was looking for. Until now. I gave her my card, this little business card I'd had printed at FedEx for $20, and she said she'd be in touch. I thought maybe she was just being polite, that I'd never hear from her again. But 2 days later, she emailed me. She wanted a full proposal, budget, timeline, everything. I spent that entire weekend working on it. The girls were with my sister, so I had the apartment to myself, and I worked from Friday night straight through to Sunday afternoon. I researched commercial pricing, contacted my suppliers for bulk quotes, created a spreadsheet of costs and markups. I designed a whole concept, wrote descriptions of each piece and why I'd chosen it. I even mocked up how things would look in their space using photos from their website. My hands were shaking when I clicked send on that email. This was it. This could change everything, or it could be nothing. I checked my email every 5 minutes for 2 days straight. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang. It was Linda. "Carmen," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "This is exactly what we wanted. You nailed it. When can we move forward?" The total order was $2,200. $2,200. Do you know what that meant? That was more than I made in a month cleaning houses. That was proof that I could do this, that people would pay for my vision, my taste, my work. I cried when I hung up the phone. Not sad tears, not scared tears, but tears of relief and hope and this overwhelming feeling of maybe, just maybe, I'm gonna make it. That order changed everything. It proved I could do this. It gave me the confidence to dream bigger. By the end of my first year, I'd made enough money to quit one of my cleaning jobs. I kept Mrs. Patterson because she'd believed in me. And honestly, I still loved making her house beautiful. But I had more time now. More time for the business, more time for my girls. The night I almost gave up turned out to be the turning point. Because I'd stopped seeing the business as something that had to save me and started seeing it as something I could build with love and intention. My booth at the flea market became known for something different than Sterling and Company. People said I made them feel welcome, that I had this gift for helping them find exactly what they needed, that my prices were fair and my smile was genuine. Word kept spreading. 2 years after that horrible day at Sterling and Company, I signed a lease for a real store. It was tiny, only 600 square feet, in a strip mall next to a nail salon and a dry cleaner. The rent was $1,200 a month, which terrified me. But Mrs. Patterson co-signed the lease. She said, "Carmen, I believe in you." And that belief, it meant everything. I couldn't afford fancy displays or expensive renovations, so I did everything myself. I spent 3 weeks painting the walls this warm cream color that reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen in Mexico. I bought lumber from Home Depot and built shelves with my own hands, watching YouTube videos to learn how. Sophia and Isabella helped, holding boards while I drilled, painting baseboards while I assembled displays. We worked every evening after school, every weekend. They complained sometimes, said their arms hurt or they were tired, but mostly they were excited. "This is gonna be so cool, Mom," Isabella kept saying. I created displays that felt like walking into someone's living room instead of a store. I grouped things by mood rather than price, mixed expensive items with affordable ones so everyone could find something. I hand-wrote little cards for each section with descriptions, quotes, ideas for how to use the pieces. I wanted people to feel inspired, not intimidated. The grand opening was on a Saturday in April. I was 37 years old, terrified and excited in equal measure. We hung balloons, set up a table with coffee and cookies I'd baked the night before. I'd sent invitations to everyone who'd ever bought from me at the flea market, posted on Facebook and Instagram, put up flyers around the neighborhood. I had no idea if anyone would come. At 9:58, 2 minutes before opening, I stood at the door with the girls. They were holding my hands, squeezing tight. Isabella looked up at me and said, "Mama, what if nobody comes?" And I said, "Then it'll just be us three, and that's okay. We're already a team." But at 10 o'clock, when I unlocked that door, there was a line. An actual line of people waiting to come in. My flea market customers, people from the neighborhood, Mrs. Patterson with 3 of her friends. They filled that tiny space, touching things, asking questions, buying. By the end of that first day, I'd made $1,700. $1,700 in one day. Sophia and Isabella helped me count the cash that night, making little piles on the kitchen table. They were so proud. They told everyone who walked by, "This is our mama's store. Our mama did this." And watching them stand there, seeing how they looked at me, not like the cleaning lady but like someone who built something, that meant more than any sale I could make. The store did well. Not amazing at first, but steady. My customers from the flea market followed me. New customers found me through word of mouth. I kept my prices reasonable, my customer service warm, and slowly, Casa Carmen became known in the community, especially in the Latino community. People would come in and we'd speak Spanish together, and they'd tell me they felt comfortable here, that other stores made them feel judged, but here they felt welcome. 6 months in, I hired my first employee, a woman named Rosa, a grandmother from Guatemala. I could only afford $12 an hour for 20 hours a week, but she said yes. Rosa had this way of making everyone feel special. She'd remember their names, what they bought last time, ask about their families. People started coming in just to talk to Rosa. She taught me that hiring people wasn't just about getting help, it was about building a family. I learned so much those first few years. I learned about business, yes, but more than that, I learned about myself. I learned I was stronger than I thought. I learned my accent didn't make me less, my background didn't make me less. If anything, it made me more. Because I understood what it felt like to be dismissed, so I made sure nobody felt that way in my store. By year 6, I had 7 stores. 7. Each one was designed with the same warmth as the first, each one training staff to treat every customer like family. I'd developed relationships with better suppliers, could afford higher quality products, but I never forgot where I came from. Every store had a section with more affordable items because I remembered counting pennies. The girls were 14 and 12 by then. Sophia wanted to be a lawyer. Isabella wanted to be an artist. They were smart, confident, bilingual, and they'd watched their mother build something from nothing. On hard days, I'd remember that. I was showing them what was possible. That rock bottom wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. My English got better over the years. I took classes, practiced, lost some of the accent, though it never fully went away. I wore better clothes, drove a better car, lived in a better apartment. But I tried not to change the important things. I still remembered what it felt like to be looked down on, to be judged by my appearance, to be told I didn't belong. Around year 8, I started thinking about expansion again. I wanted to open 2 more stores, maybe 3, to reach that goal of 10 locations. I'd come so far from that tiny booth at the flea market. I was proud of what I'd built, proud of the team I'd developed, proud that I could now afford to send my girls to a good school, take them on vacation once a year, give them opportunities I never had. But 10 years after that day at Sterling and Company, something happened that I never could have predicted. 10 years to the day, actually. It was March again, another Thursday, and I was meeting with my business advisor about potential new locations. She showed me a list of available properties, and one name jumped out at me immediately. Sterling and Company, 3 locations available. I felt my heart stop. "What?" I said. "Sterling and Company is for sale?" My advisor nodded. "All 3 locations. The owner's been struggling for years, apparently. Bad management, complaints about customer service, losing money. She's trying to sell before she has to declare bankruptcy." I sat there, staring at that name on the paper, and I felt 10 years of memories crash over me. The shame, the anger, the determination. That woman who'd made me feel like nothing, who'd told me I couldn't afford anything in her store, who'd called security like I was a threat. She was losing everything. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt sad. But mostly, I felt something else. Possibility. Because I'd become someone who could afford to buy those stores. Not just afford them, but turn them around, make them into something better. Something warm and welcoming instead of cold and exclusive. I spent the next 2 weeks researching everything about Sterling and Company. The financials were worse than I thought. Jacqueline Sterling had inherited the stores from her father, but she didn't have his business sense or his people skills. She'd alienated customers, created a reputation for elitism that drove people away. In an age where people wanted authenticity and connection, she doubled down on exclusivity and snobbery. She was losing money fast. I made an offer through my lawyer. A fair offer, maybe even generous considering the circumstances. I didn't lowball her or try to humiliate her. That wasn't who I was. The negotiation took 3 weeks. I'd spent years reinvesting every profit back into the business, and with my 10 stores as collateral, the bank approved a loan for the purchase. She countered. I countered back. Finally, we reached an agreement. I would buy all 3 Sterling and Company locations for a total of $1.2 million. With my 10 stores, that would bring me to 13 locations total, with a combined value of $4.7 million. The day we signed the papers, I didn't meet Jacqueline in person. It was all done through lawyers and emails. But I knew she knew my name by then. Carmen Rodriguez. I wondered if she remembered me. I wondered if she'd made the connection. I spent the next 6 months renovating the 3 Sterling stores. I kept the name for the flagship location, the one where I'd been humiliated, as a kind of full circle moment. But everything else, I changed completely. The cold white walls that had made me feel so unwelcome, I repainted them in warm beiges and soft grays. The harsh lighting, I replaced with warm LEDs. The untouchable displays, I opened up. I wanted people to touch things, to pick them up, to imagine them in their homes. But the biggest change was the training. I spent hours with my team, teaching them what I'd learned the hard way. I told them my story, about walking into that store and being made to feel worthless. I said, I never want anyone to feel that way here. I don't care if someone walks in wearing a ball gown or gym clothes. Everyone gets treated with respect. Everyone gets treated like they matter. The grand reopening of the flagship Sterling and Company location was planned for November, a Thursday. 10.5 years after Jacqueline Sterling threw me out. I hired an event planner, but I made all the important decisions myself. The invitations, the catering, the flowers, the speech. Everything had to be perfect. I sent invitations to everyone, press, business owners, customers, my staff, my suppliers, and yes, I sent one to Jacqueline too. The invitation was elegant, cream-colored with gold lettering. It said, "You're invited to the grand reopening of Sterling and Company under new management." It didn't say who the new owner was. I wanted that to be a surprise. The week before the reopening, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake going over my speech, changing words, adding lines, taking them out. What do you say to someone who tried to destroy your dignity? I didn't want to be cruel. That wasn't who I was. But I also wanted her to understand what she'd done and what it had cost her. Sophia came into my room one night around 2 a.m. "Mom," she said, "you're still awake?" I was sitting up in bed with my notebook, writing and rewriting the speech. I'd been practicing it for days, saying the words out loud, trying to get comfortable with the English, with the emotion, with standing in front of people and telling my truth. She sat down next to me. "Are you nervous about next week?" I nodded. "I am. This is a big deal, baby. This is the woman who made me feel worthless. And now I'm taking over her store. I don't want to be mean, but I also don't want to pretend it didn't happen." Sophia took my hand. "Mom," she said, "you've never been mean in your life. You've always been strong and kind. That's why you won. Not because you were meaner or smarter, because you were better. So just be yourself. Tell the truth. That's all you need to do. Out of the mouths of 18-year-olds, right?" But she was right. I didn't need to perform or prove anything. The truth was enough. The story was enough. Have you ever had a moment where you finally stood up for yourself after years of being pushed down? Have you ever gotten to show someone who hurt you that they were wrong about you? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happened next, it's the part of the story I'll never forget. The day of the reopening was perfect. Crisp and cold, the kind of November day where the sun shines but you need a coat. The store looked beautiful, transformed. There was catering, champagne, flowers everywhere. My daughters were there in beautiful dresses, so grown up at 18 and 16. My staff wore matching name tags. The local news sent a reporter. It felt surreal. She had no idea who bought her family's stores until that moment. I was backstage in the storage area, looking at my notes for the speech I was going to give, when my assistant came running back. "She's here," she said. "Ms. Sterling. She just walked in." My hands started shaking. Not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. This was it. The moment where the circle closed, where rock bottom met the top. I took a deep breath, looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a navy blue suit, elegant but not showy. My hair was done, my makeup was perfect. I looked like a businesswoman, because I was a businesswoman. I walked out into the store and I saw her immediately. Jacqueline Sterling standing near the entrance, looking around with confusion and something else. Loss, maybe. She looked older, tired. She was wearing a nice coat, but I could see it was a few seasons old, see the slight wear at the cuffs. She looked like someone who'd fallen from grace and was still trying to pretend she hadn't. I didn't approach her yet. I walked to the small stage we'd set up near the center of the store. Someone handed me a microphone. The crowd quieted down. Maybe 70 people there, all looking at me expectantly. And in the back, Jacqueline, still not understanding. "Good evening, everyone," I said, and my voice came out strong, clear. My accent was still there, but faint now, and I didn't apologize for it. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the reopening of Sterling and Company. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Carmen Rodriguez, and I'm the new owner of this store and 2 others in the Sterling collection." I saw Jacqueline's face change, saw the recognition start to dawn, saw her eyes go wide. I continued. 10 years ago, I walked into this store for the first time. I was a cleaning lady, working hard to support my 2 daughters after my husband died. A client had sent me here to buy a gift, had trusted me with her credit card and her confidence. But when I walked through that door, I was told I didn't belong. I was told I couldn't afford anything here. I was told to leave. The crowd was silent now. Some people glancing around, confused. Others looking at Jacqueline, putting the pieces together. The woman who owned this store at that time, she judged me by my clothes, my accent, my appearance. She made me feel worthless. She made me feel like I was nothing. And that day, sitting in my van in the parking lot crying, I made myself a promise. I promised myself that I would build something. Not just for me, but for every person who'd ever been made to feel small. For every person who deserved beauty and kindness and respect, but was denied it because of how they looked or where they came from. My voice got stronger. And so I started with an $11,000 inheritance and a dream. I started with a tiny booth at a flea market. I worked 2 jobs, slept 4 hours a night, failed more times than I can count. But I kept going. And today, I stand here as the owner of 12 luxury stores worth $4.7 million. Today, I stand here as a woman who turned rock bottom into a foundation. The crowd started clapping. I held up my hand gently to continue. I bought these sterling stores not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to transform them. I wanted to take these spaces that once represented exclusivity and elitism and turn them into places where everyone feels welcome, where a cleaning lady can walk in and be treated with the same respect as a CEO, where your worth isn't measured by your bank account but by your humanity. The applause was louder now. I looked directly at Jacqueline. She was pale, her hand over her mouth. I stepped off the stage and walked through the crowd toward her. People moved aside. When I reached her, we stood face to face. Up close, I could see the shame in her eyes, the understanding of what she'd lost, what her cruelty had cost her. I spoke quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. You told me I couldn't afford anything in your store. You were right. I couldn't. So I bought the whole thing instead. These 3 stores, they're mine now. And you want to know what the first thing I did was? I trained my entire staff on one rule. Treat every single person who walks through that door like they matter. Because they do. Jacqueline's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I nodded slowly. I believe you are. But sorry doesn't change the past. It can only change the future. I hope you learn from this. I hope you understand that how you treat people, it matters. It always matters. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because it was true. Because what I said next, I'll never forget. It's been 10 years, and every day of those 10 years, I remembered how you made me feel. But I also remembered that I survived it. I climbed out of that hole. And now I'm standing here, and you're standing there, and the only difference between us is that I chose kindness. I chose to build something that lifts people up instead of pushing them down. That's the difference. Jacqueline nodded, tears running down her face now. She turned and walked out. I watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and peace. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I felt complete. Like a chapter that had been stuck open for 10 years had finally closed. The rest of the evening was beautiful. People came up to me, congratulating me, asking about my story, telling me their own stories of being made to feel small. A woman told me she'd been rejected from a country club because of her last name. A man told me he'd been laughed out of a car dealership because he came in wearing work clothes. We all had stories. We all knew what rock bottom felt like. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the store. My store. I walked through it slowly, touching the displays, smelling the candles, looking at the warm lighting that made everything feel inviting instead of intimidating. This was what I'd wanted to create. Not just a business, but a statement. A proof that how you've been treated doesn't have to define how you treat others. I drove home that night and the girls were waiting up for me. They hugged me tight, and Sophia said, "Mom, you're amazing. You know that, right?" And Isabella said, "When I grow up, I want to be strong like you." I held them and I thought about everything it took to get here. The shame, the failure, the exhaustion, the moments where I wanted to quit. All of it worth it because I'd taught them something more valuable than money. I'd taught them that rock bottom is not where you stay. It's where you start. A few weeks after the reopening, I did something I'd been meaning to do for years. I drove to the cemetery where Miguel was buried. I brought flowers, sat down on the grass next to his headstone. I told him everything about the business, about the stores, about facing Jacqueline Sterling. I told him about the girls, how proud he'd be of them. And then I said something I'd needed to say for a long time. I did it, baby. I really did it. I took our daughters and the little bit of money you left us, and I built something. Something that matters. Something that helps people. I hope you're proud. I hope you're watching. I hope you know that we're okay. More than okay. We're thriving. Sitting there, I realized something important. The story isn't really about Sterling and Company or about Jacqueline or even about the $4.7 million. The story is about what happens when someone tries to make you feel worthless and you decide to prove your worth anyway. Not to them, but to yourself. The story is about taking the worst day of your life and using it as fuel instead of letting it destroy you. They see where you're from. Show them where you're going. That's what I'd done. Jacqueline Sterling had seen a cleaning lady with worn shoes and an accent. I showed her a businesswoman with 12 stores and a legacy. But more than that, I showed my daughters that we don't have to accept other people's judgment of us. We get to write our own story. If you're in your own rock-bottom moment right now, if someone has made you feel small, if you're wondering how you'll ever climb out of that hole, let me tell you something. You will. Not because it's easy, not because it happens fast, but because you're stronger than you know. That pain you're feeling, it can destroy you or it can fuel you. The choice is yours. I chose fuel. I chose to take every ounce of that shame and humiliation and turn it into determination. And you can too. Listen, I'm not going to lie to you and say it's simple. It's not. There were so many nights I wanted to quit. When you're at rock bottom, everything looks impossible from down there. But here's what I learned. You don't have to see the top to start climbing. You just have to take one step, then another. Some days, my step was just getting out of bed. Some days, it was making one phone call to a supplier who'd already rejected me. Some days, it was choosing not to give up, and that was enough. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to decide you're gonna try. And here's the other thing. Rock bottom gives you something. It gives you clarity. When you've lost everything, when someone's made you feel worthless, that's when you find out what you're made of. That's when you decide who you're gonna be. Are you gonna let them define you? Or are you gonna define yourself? I could have stayed a cleaning lady. There's no shame in that work. But that woman at Sterling and Company didn't just insult my job. She insulted my humanity. And I couldn't accept that. Not for me, not for my daughters. So I climbed. Some days I fell back, some days I just hung there. But I never let go completely. The business continues to grow. We opened store number 13 last month. Number 14 is planned for next spring. I've been able to hire people from my community, immigrants like me who just need a chance. I've been able to donate to organizations that help women start businesses. But the moment I'm most proud of? Last week, a young woman came into one of my stores, nervous, wearing clothes that had seen better days, speaking with a thick accent. One of my employees approached her with a warm smile and said, "Welcome to Casa Carmen. How can we help you feel at home today?" And I watched that young woman's shoulders relax, watched her smile. That's what it's all about. If you connected with this story, if it meant something to you, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel. Not because I need the numbers, but because I want to keep sharing these stories. Stories about people who started at rock bottom and clawed their way up. Stories that remind us we're not alone in our struggles. Stories that prove transformation is possible. Your subscription, it helps me reach more people who need to hear that message. So if you're willing, hit that subscribe button. Let's build this community together. 10 years ago, Jacqueline Sterling told me I couldn't afford anything in her store. She was right. I couldn't. But what she didn't understand is that being told no doesn't mean you have to accept it. It means you have to work harder, dream bigger, fight longer. And when you finally prove them wrong, you do it with grace. You do it with class. I own 12 luxury stores worth $4.7 million today. But you know what I'm most proud of? I did it without losing myself. I did it without becoming the person who hurt me. I did it by choosing kindness when I could have chosen bitterness, by remembering where I came from instead of pretending I was always here. That's the real victory. Not the money, not the stores. The real victory is that I stayed human. I stayed true to the woman who sat in that van 10 years ago, crying but not broken. That woman, she's still here. She's just stronger now. She's just proof that rock bottom is not the end. It's the beginning. And the climb up. That's where you find out who you really are. They tried to tell me who I was. I showed them who I could become. And honey, that makes all the difference.